Hi there, folks. Hi. I'm going to get started if that's okay with you. It's just about 20 after 8, and 20 after 8, right? And we're set to go for an hour for this session. My name's Darcel Hall, and I'm going to be leading this workshop, which is the Taking Risks the Smart Way, Effective Risk Management for Nonprofit Organizations. That's what I'll be talking about today. So just to give you an idea of who I am and my background, I've got about 12 years of experience supporting public sector and nonprofit clients to identify, plan, design, and implement information technology and information management solutions. So my company, MD&A Consultants, works with clients in health, human, and social services to understand organizational challenges and opportunities. So we really, we don't put technology at the front of what we do. We're really focused on organizational challenges and opportunities in the way that we look at technology in our work. The work that we do is focused on strategy and planning, project management, business analysis, and training and methodology support in all of those areas. So we may do project management, methodology, training, develop custom project management methodologies for organizations, that type of activity. And even more interestingly, I'd like you to know that I am a tap dancing beginner because it's never too late to try something new. Before I get any further into the presentation, I'd like to talk a little bit about the title of the presentation, which I didn't really include in the slide material, but I'd like to explain. I talked about taking risks the smart way, and I think I've been fairly well indoctrinated by an organization here in Toronto called Smart Risk. Does anyone know about Smart Risk in the room? It's an injury prevention organization. And the interesting thing about Smart Risk is it works with youth in the area of injury prevention, but it doesn't take a sort of negative consequences approach to thinking about accidents and accident prevention. But it talks about what you can do to avoid avoid problems that come with activities that you might engage in by being prepared. And being prepared in the world of injury prevention means getting trained, using equipment, being prepared, and staying focused. So, you know, you can still snowboard, you can bungee jump, you can do all the things that you'd like to do, but you need to do it properly and be prepared. So for me, that's where I want to make the connection between Smart Risk being about proactive risk management, rather than waiting for risks to come along and having to sort of react in a state of chaos. How can you think about risk more proactively in a nonprofit organization? And what that means is using risk management processes, thinking with a risk management mindset, and really making sure that you always think about risk in relation to strategy, to organizational objectives, to mandate, and to values. And as long as those two things are really close together, when you react to a situation, you're doing so from an educated and a planned place. And that's what we're really going to talk about today. So how we're going to tackle that is we're going to go through some concepts, goals, and approaches that are fundamental to risk management. Then we're going to talk about sources and types of risks for organizations. And those little asterisks mean there's a bit of an exercise that I want to tackle with you to see if we can work together to identify risks. Then we'll look at reviewing risk management processes and identify some critical success factors in risk management. And then finally, we'll do some final questions and wrap up. Does anybody have any questions about the agenda or the topic at this point? Feel free to stop me, and I'll warn you, I'm doing my best to de-jargonify, if that's a word, risk management, but it's a challenge. because it's a very jargon-laden field. And my objective here is to really try to help you understand the concepts as best as possible. So feel free to call me on a jargon alert if there's a term in there that I just haven't managed to unpack. Okay? So let's start with a pop quiz. I'd like to get a sense of where you're all from so that I can understand what your experience is. So I'd like to start with just understanding the kinds of organizations you're coming from. So perhaps with a show of hands, I could find out which of you are working in literacy service organizations where you're working directly with learners. Okay. What about literacy support organizations? Oh, about half and half. Public sector organizations and private sector. Okay. Anything else that I missed? Yes. Okay. All right. So also a show of hands. How many people here are from Toronto? Ontario? And outside Ontario? Welcome. Okay, so next question, a little tougher. I want to understand your familiarity with risk management. Can you give me a show of hands on how many of you think you have some idea of what it is and why it's important? Okay. What about your experience in identifying and managing risk? Is that something that you've done any work on in your organization? Okay. And what about actually undertaking a risk management assessment for a project in a project management context? Yeah, a couple? Fewer? Okay, so it sounds like more of your risk management experience has been at the organizational level, perhaps at the board level? Yeah? Okay. So let's go ahead and tackle concepts, goals, and approaches. And where people tend to always start is with definitions, and it's surprising how a little word like risk can be so contentious to define. But so I'm going to give you a couple. So let's start with risk being understood as probability or threat of damage, injury, liability, loss, or other negative occurrence caused by external or internal vulnerabilities. So this is, I would say, a fairly traditional interpretation of risk as threat and a real focus on the negative consequences associated with risk. If you want to take a little more neutral approach, and this next approach actually comes from the Treasury Board's risk management framework, their definition of risk, an uncertain event or condition that, if it occurs, will have a positive or negative effect on one of more objectives. So this definition I like a little bit more because it's sort of opening up the possibility that risk isn't always a bad thing, and that there's some chance it might happen, and that there's a link to objective, which brings in that strategy piece that I want us to keep in mind. Finally, I think this is a really important message for nonprofits and people engaged in social change and progressive issues. Risk is associated with change, which is necessary for progress toward goals. I think most people who are working in a literacy organization or with literacy organizations are interested in progress and change for the people that they work for and the people they work with. And so I think that really needs to influence how you think about risk management as well, and be willing to take the odd chance. So from there, where do we go to risk management? A discipline that enables organizations to cope with uncertainty by taking steps to protect assets, resources, and activities. So again, this is a close management, sort of more of a traditional notion of risk management. Yes, sir? No, it's not, but I can give it to you. And there's handouts on the table that include my contact information. Yeah, no problem. Okay. So in terms of risk management, I covered the first definition, which is the more traditional one. Secondly, we understand risk management as a systemic approach to setting the best course of action under uncertainty by identifying, analyzing, assigning, and responding to risks over time according to organizational or project objectives. So you may get a sense that I like that second one more. And the reasons I like it more is that, again, it mentions organizational priorities, and it also suggests a responsiveness to the context that organizations are working in, be it a funding issue, a policy issue, directions, changes, all the various sort of winds that buffet organizations that cause them to have to react or to think more proactively about how to move forward in the face of funding shifts, policy shifts, new methodologies, new processes that come along the way. So now moving on to the goal of risk management. Now the definition of a goal that I've chosen, again, to me aligns with my notion of smart risk. So the goal of risk management is to minimize potential risks while maximizing potential opportunities and optimizing achievement of objectives using standardized processes at the organizational, project, and decision-making level. So I want to pull apart, I'm going to talk a little bit more about balancing risk and opportunity a little bit later, but what I really want to pull out at this point is the 3 levels of risk management: organizational, project, and decision-making. And this is another piece I want to really stress, is that as we move out of thinking about risk management as a response to a particular event at a particular point in time, be it a project or a situation, how do we think about taking that risk management mindset and really making it a part of the organization, really believing in risk management and how we do project management, and thinking of, with a risk management brain when we're making decisions on a daily level. And this is another thing that's very interesting if you were to look at the material that's being put out by the Treasury Board, which is a federal organization right now, and how they're instituting a risk management framework for the federal level of public service. And they're really taking a very strong approach on risk management as a tool to try to build flexibility and create innovation rather than thinking about risk as something that locks down and prevents change. So I really want to pick that up, that notion of the that mindset that you take to the work that you do on a daily basis once you start to think about what risk is and how you can respond to it. The other piece I want to come back to is the notion about opportunities and risks. I think I've raised this before about the fact that there are risks which tend to be what are called downside. And downside risks are the notions of threat. And then there's opportunities, which really are what some people call upside risks, a bit of a jargon alert, which really just means that a risk can be negative or positive. And to some extent, it's how you respond to it. And I guess it's a bit of a glass is half full, glass is half empty analogy, where you can use the word risk either way. Okay, so now we're moving on to talk about approaches. And I'm going to take a couple of different cracks at talking about risk management approaches. And here I'm going to try to introduce some of the key terms and some jargon used in the field of risk management, and hopefully make some sense of it. So risk management methods are intended to balance risk and opportunity. We've covered that. And they do that according to risk principles, risk attitudes, and risk tolerance. And these are the things that we need to define for the organization. So the risk principles are those that reflect the organization's values, ethics, and context. So say in a navel-gazing mode, when people are sitting around thinking about what they think risk management means, they really need to get to the heart of what they think risk management can accomplish for them and how it aligns with their ethics and also with what's going on in their environment. And try to codify that into some principle statements, which I think is something actually the literacy field does very well. As a person who's currently working with the Ontario Adult Literacy Curriculum Project, the principles associated with literacy are a key part of the discussions that we have on a regular basis when working on the project. So certainly thinking about learner-centered approaches, thinking about outcomes, that kind of language needs to be translated into into thinking about risk management as well.